Operating at an extraordinary level can seem challenging. Learn how to survive in the lone wolf economy in the OG Money podcast with Lonnie Ogulnick. Drawing on over 20 years of experience in the trenches of Wall Street, Lonnie explores what it takes to be successful in today's rapidly changing environment. From daily routines, wealth strategies, and sustaining the highest levels of wisdom, Lonnie and his guests unpack proven ways to live an extraordinary life.
Welcome to the OG Money Podcast. We have today a special OG in the Valente Brothers trilogy, Gui Valente. Normally I would say it's the last Valente, but when your sister comes to town, we're going to do one with her as well. So it's not the last one. Welcome to the podcast, Guy.
Thank you so much, Lonnie. It's a great pleasure for me to finally participate. I wasn't sure if I was going to be invited or not after my two brothers were invited, but I'm very happy to discuss pretty much anything with you, and I'm sure we're going to have fun.
Well, I always save the best for last.
Thank you.
We did kind of bond in striking, right? Like that's where you and I connected. And in this academy, we have striking, we have jujitsu, we have tactical firearms. It's a one-stop shop for all your self-defense needs. What made you specialize in striking?
Well, actually for us, it's all jujitsu. It's all really connected to our ability to defend ourselves. And striking is a major element of Jiu-Jitsu. Of course, through time, Jiu-Jitsu, our lineage in Brazil really became famous for the grappling, also because of the specialization that occurred due to tournament grappling, the striking element, and even the stand-up self-defense element. And I would say that even the takedown element was a bit lost. Eventually, you could say that it was lost pretty much entirely. But because my grandfather, my dad, they were practicing jiu-jitsu, and we were fortunate, very fortunate, to have Grandmaster Hélio as our teacher. We were always connected to that past. As I was growing up, my father thought it was a good idea for us to also learn some other striking styles, because at that time, our school in Brazil that we trained was already focusing more on the sportive aspect. Talking to my teacher, also Grandmaster Hélio, we started, my brothers and I, at a very young age. I think I started having boxing classes, English boxing style classes when I was 9 years old. And I really liked it. I liked it. At the time, it was actually very different because at the boxing school, we were listening to music as we were training. That doesn't happen in our school in Jiu-Jitsu. My teacher was just coming back from a trip in New York, where he really specialized, and he was also a coach. So he brought back some nice hip-hop songs from, I think, the 1990s. This is 1989, 1990.
It's my generation.
1991. So it was very fun. And growing up, I felt very empowered by striking. So I never stopped, and I was training it pretty much as I was going to jiu-jitsu. I was also going to boxing. Later on, I also, already as a jiu-jitsu teacher, one of our students comes from a very strong kickboxing family in Holland, Dutch kickboxing, which is one of the most respected kickboxing styles. And through him also, I've been going to Holland, to Amsterdam, at least once a year since 2011 or 2012. That also motivated me a lot to learn more and more about striking.
All right, let's get into the guts a little bit back in your childhood, because I think we identify like I'm not a scientist, or I don't pretend to be, but I think like 90% of who we are like right now was forged between the ages of like 13 and 17. Those years are pivotal. Your dad, Grandmaster Pedro Valente Sr., a red belt, multiple stripe red belt. You're the middle child of four, so you're following in the footsteps of Pedro. You're following a leader. You're the role model to your younger brother, Joaquim, and you're the protector to your sister, Joanna.
Yes.
So you got a lot on your shoulders right here. How much do you believe those early years with all of those four traits that I discussed forged who you are? And what was that sort of like growing up in Brazil as the middle child in this family that basically was related not through blood but through heaven, God, with the dynasty of the Gracie family? Tell me a little bit about like what was that childhood like growing up?
That's a great question, Lonnie. It really, as you were talking about between 13 and 17, and as you formulated your question, it was like me going in a time machine. So I'll try to share a little bit of what came to my mind. So when I was 13, that's when Pedro, my oldest brother, moved away. He graduated from high school in 1993. And in August, I believe in August, sometime between July and August, he moved from Rio de Janeiro to Miami. That's when our story here in Miami begins. And at that point, I saw myself, I was pretty much hanging out more with my brother, even though we're 5 years apart. I was hanging out more with my brother and his friends than with my own friends. So it was a difficult time where I felt a little bit lonely, and I had to really start at that point connecting with my friends from my class and my generation. And in that process, Jujutsu was always present. My teacher, Hélio Gracie, we called him always Tio Hélio, which in English means Uncle Hélio. He was always there. I was always going to his house, especially in those years. Weekends, I would say sometimes 2 or 3 weekends out of a month, I was at his house. Long holidays and even vacations. I spent a couple times at least 30, 40 days straight living with Hélio Gracie. Just us, his wife, and that was it. Sometimes his children would come to visit, and that was very important because it really helped me develop myself, and my father used Grandmaster Hélio a lot in that respect. My father was still very busy with his career as a doctor and also Secretary of Health in public office, everything else he did. My dad was always very active in everything. So that was very, very, very instrumental, I believe, in shaping who I am today. My sister at that time was becoming pretty much a star in show jumping. She was riding my dad's horses and competing internationally, becoming Brazilian champion for her age division, South American champion, to the point where she was an international champion competing in the worlds. I think they went to Japan to participate in some world events. And Joaquim, my youngest brother, a lot younger, going to me to boxing. I would take Joaquim to boxing when Joaquim was the youngest actually to start striking regularly. Always trying to stay connected to my brother, vacations, trying to come here to Miami to spend time with him, and training also at the Gracie School in Rio de Janeiro. Royler Gracie, that you have met and you have trained with, one of Grandmaster Hélio's sons, was the head instructor at that school, his brother as well, Holker. Being around at night, going to Jiu-Jitsu at 7 p.m., and really experiencing something very unique. I remember that, of course, later began to develop some very strong connections with my friends in my class, and it was very strange, as my friends were home already doing homework and preparing to go to bed, I was still at Jiu-Jitsu, coming back from Jiu-Jitsu or coming back from boxing. That's pretty much, I think.
Urban legend has it, I might be wrong, but there are rumors around the school that Gui Valente had a little temper. Is that true or not?
Yes, it is true. I think that for many reasons, I struggled a little bit with what we refer to as fudoshin, right? Emotional balance. I was a bit short-fused. I think I have improved a lot in that respect. But for some reason, they say maybe because I was the middle child, I did not do well with any type of insult, or in Brazil we say I did not like to take any type of insult back home. There's a saying in Portuguese. I had to find a way to resolve that situation on the spot. Of course, because of Jiu-Jitsu, I was usually successful. Sometimes I also took a few shots here and there, but I think it was good. And I think that, I actually discuss this a lot with my friends nowadays that grew up with me. I never saw myself as a bully. I was pretty difficult, but never in a negative way. I could have avoided some situations for sure. I could have avoided some situations, but when you're 13, 14 years old, or even younger, 15, I think you're still learning. And yes, I think that today I'm much calmer.
Yeah, so I can relate a bit. I was the runt of the litter. In ninth grade, I think I weighed at like 75 pounds. They didn't even have a wrestling weight class for me. And I would get picked on. I had that same in America. The saying was, don't start the fight, but finish it.
Let me say that that I can remember, I only had a real fight with an underclassman once. Almost all of my scuffles, problems in middle school and high school were with older kids, always.
Well, that brings me to my next question. So you kind of represented the Gracie School, sport jiu-jitsu. There were challenge matches in that era. There was a lot of beach fights. So did you roll with that crowd where there was always something about to pop off and did pop off? Like, was that, would you say your group of friends, like, you didn't want to get into a scrap because everybody knew how to handle themselves in the streets, or?
No, that's another great question. Actually, no. My jiu-jitsu friends were from jiu-jitsu, and that's it. I trained with them at jiu-jitsu, and then I went home, and my friends, the ones that I was really hanging out with, were my school friends. And for some reason, they were not training jiu-jitsu. Some of them tried at some point here and there, but they never felt really comfortable at the jiu-jitsu school. A couple times I found myself having to actually, this is as we got a little older in high school, in some situations in the street, I had to actually avoid fights and even walk away from some situations that I still remember that I wish I had a better backup.
Right.
Of course, nothing against my friends. It's just these are friends of mine that I really care about and very intellectual, very successful also today. Went to great universities, but they were just not into martial arts and to fighting. I think that if you can connect both, if you can connect, going to good schools and preparing yourself intellectually, but also dedicating yourself to the practice of self-defense, fighting, knowing how and when to fight back if necessary, I think that's very good. And growing up, that would be a great asset. Never to look for a fight, but if something happens, you have to be realistic. You can't fight a crowd. I remember one time, I was actually discussing this also with some of my friends recently. We were going to a huge soccer game in Brazil. And soccer games in Brazil, in South America, can become very violent, the supporters of each team. And we were in a car, and as we drove by a group of fans from another team, one of my friends just screamed the name of his team and, put a flag out or something. And we were kids. We were maybe, 14, 15 years old. An adult was driving. I don't remember who. But there was a light, and it was red light. And it was like an organized, like hooligans. These guys just ran at our car and surrounded our car and started pounding the car and hitting the car with bamboos that hold the flag. And
just
what are you going to do? Yeah. I like your team. Don't beat me up.
As Joaquin would say, you stay in the car and you drive. That's your weapon.
Correct.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just have to avoid, and, you definitely, I think the street teaches you, the reality of the streets teach you that you shouldn't try to be a superhero. Yeah. You have to be intelligent too.
Yeah, so I'll tell you a story. When I first came in here, because I was a two-time all-county wrestler, and I walk in, I'm like, I did a little MMA stuff back in the day in New York City, hurt my rib, gave it up. But when I came here, I'm like, I'm going to come in here. I thought I could handle myself. I mean, what a humbling experience once you enter jiu-jitsu. From anything else, I was just like, okay, I am clearly the ground zero of self-defense. It's so humbling to know what jiu-jitsu is. So when you leave in the streets, if you get into an altercation and that guy knows more jiu-jitsu than you, you're dead. Like it would be really difficult to be in a situation.
No, and when you have many people, multiple opponents, many people coming at you, that is a very bad situation. So you should avoid. And you can't think that, I'm going to beat, 5, 6 guys. So even 2, if they know how to fight, two guys that know how to fight versus one is already very difficult. Of course, you will fight, and if you have to, and there are strategies, especially striking strategies, that you can use. Some surprise attacks, you have to be aggressive. If you're cornered, if you're in a back alley, there are things you can do. But undoubtedly, you're in a bad position if you have to fight more than one opponent.
I don't know if it's just me, but what's interesting is, even though I've been training now for about 5 or 6 years, I still don't think of myself as somebody who can defend themselves that well in the street. Maybe it's because of my size.
You can.
No, I do know, because when
And you have the attitude too, by the way.
Right.
You have the attitude.
What I do know is when I play around or horse around with friends or family and it gets rough, you realize it.
Yeah.
Or when you spar here sometimes. But mentally, I stay in the mind frame of, like, I would never want to get into
Oh,
an
yeah, but that's the
altercation.
best. That's the first line of self-defense and the best one. Whenever a student of mine, and fortunately our school, we've been here for quite some time, our students are really not getting into fights. But if there is an altercation, if there is some type of situation, I'm very happy when a student tells me, there was a problem, but there was no fight. I avoided the fight. Or if there was a physical altercation, I did not have to hurt this person that was attacking me. So.
Yeah. And also a lot of times the confidence, once that person knows, I've been in several situations where I just was like, you really want to do this? And they understood from my body language, maybe the way I was standing, it got diffused because, like any bully, when they recognize.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just touching back on one last thing that really hit me when you asked me about my youth and growing up, if I was training a lot of jiu-jitsu, if I was going to the school regularly, not missing classes, that would give me so much confidence when I went out, starting going out to clubs and to parties for some reason. Just because I was training, even without my friends that trained jiu-jitsu too there, that made me feel so much more relaxed and confident.
Yeah, without a doubt. Like, there's no situation in the street today where I don't feel I can handle myself, right? And that goes a long way, right? Today, fast forward, I will tell you, you do not have a temper, so that's a good thing. That might have been something, but you come across now as very smooth, calm, confident, relaxed, great instructor, an absolutely amazing father. What I would like to delve into a little bit right now, though, is today's society, right? I think we're in the most stressful, anxiety-ridden disaster that I could ever think of, imagined for not just me, you, our children, the world that we're growing up in. They're getting masked by drugs, alcohol, medication, prescription medications for depression, for anxiety. You can't go to school without masks on. They just let you go to school. All of these things, the psychological damage being done to today's society, and we don't know when it's going to end. What advice do you have to combat the anxiety without delving into alcohol, drugs, prescription medications, sleep medications? What would you say to somebody today in this world if they sat down with you and they said, Guy, my kid's having problems, I'm having problems. How do we deal with all of these stresses that are beating people up today?
Some believe that you cannot teach heart. The Valente Brothers disagree with that. We believe that you can teach heart. You have to be ready and willing to fight through adversity. You cannot quit. You cannot stop fighting. And you have to understand that sometimes things will get pretty difficult, but that should not be an excuse or any reason for you to stop pushing forward. So I believe that mentality has been lost in many ways, but I believe that if you do not view life as a daily battle, you will not succeed or you'll not be able to go through life without the aid of everything you mentioned, all these artificial substances and all these crutches.
Okay,
now,
so you say face the battle, right?
Face the battle.
So what are the techniques of facing the battle? I know what I do. I wake up in the morning, I hit the gym, I go in the cold plunge, I go in the steam, I go in the sauna, I work hard, right? He who makes himself a beast rids himself of the pain of being a man. I love that quote. I get to jiu-jitsu as much as I can. You still don't fully absolve yourself from restless nights, whether it's work with the stock market crashing, whether it's your kids having an issue, your wife having an issue, friends having issues. You're taking on a lot of water. You seem calm. You seem like nothing ever gets to you. What's the key to that?
Well, first of all, things get to me sometimes. It's normal. I'm a human being. And I've gone through some nights where I had to just think about life. And I believe that you can always see things in a positive manner. And I think that having a support group, be it family, friends, coworkers, people that you are connected with, that will help you see those positives when things get pretty negative is key. So surrounding yourself with positivity and with individuals that think alike, that have this mindset, this fighter's mindset, is very important. First step is knowledge. You have to build knowledge. You have to learn. You have to face your fears through understanding how to deal with those fears. Fear, many times, can actually help you avoid dangers and avoid certain situations. But you cannot hide. You cannot run away. And you also have to remember and understand that when you go through the bad times that you mentioned, those are the times that you're actually growing. If you just keep hiding and hiding and hiding, be it from something that happens to you willingly, or sometimes you don't want it to happen, but you have to go through it in order to grow. Stress is what makes us grow. Adversity is what makes us really appreciate what we have.
Can I ask you a personal question?
Please.
What is the most adversarial thing that you personally had to get through in your life?
Well, I think death, my father's passing. He was our mentor, our teacher, our best friend. I think he passed at a still relatively young age. And that was very difficult for us. And it's something that's with us. You know I say us because of my brothers. It's the same. Every single day we think about him, and we think about him in good times and bad times. And we always want him to be around. We always want to hear his thoughts and his opinions on certain things. And he also prepared us. Hélio Gracie also prepared us to have those answers and to really try to imagine and come up with exactly what they would tell us. So I think it's very hard, but we try.
So let me press on that for a second. Your father, I know there's too many things to go through. What was something he told you in life, your aha moment that sticks with you on a daily basis from an advice standpoint?
Well, there are many, but again, what comes to my mind right now, it was basically, I would say, a week before he passed away. He came here to visit us, and he was already fighting his cancer, always, strong, and he had a very serious situation, and he actually outlived all of his doctor's predictions. But he flew, 8 hours to come here, actually to visit me for my birthday. We were building this school. We were building our headquarters, the Valente Brothers building.
I remember it.
You remember?
Oh, yeah.
And my father was a doer. Is that how you say it in English?
Yeah.
He would not rest until whatever he wanted to get accomplished was mission accomplished. And he was very interested in the mat system, in the tatami system that we were choosing for our school. And he actually gave us an advice. He said, look, your tatami, your mat system, is the equivalent of my OR, my operational room. Should not cut any corners, spend whatever it is to have the best system. We were researching a few options, and we found out that a gymnastics gym close by had something similar, at least a subfloor of the mat system that we wanted. So he said, let's go there right now. And we went there, and we saw the system. And right next to this gymnastics school was a gym. And in this gym, we walked in to also see their facility. they had a huge, long monkey bar. And, I was there with my brothers, and my dad was walking around, and we were in different parts of the gym. And I decided to jump and grab the monkey bar. And I wasn't really in shape at that point. I wasn't doing pull-ups too much, in pull-up shape or monkey bar shape at least. And I started going, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to do a couple times, just go from one to the other and let go. And I started, and when I was about to let go, I looked to the side, and my dad was right there, and he goes, don't give up. Don't give up. And so I continued, and my hands were burning, but there was no way I would give up. And he just continued walking. As I was doing the monkey bar, he was walking by my side saying, let's go. Come on, let's go. Let's go. And that just brought me back to my youth, because that's how my dad was with us. If it was doing sit-ups, if it was running up the hills with us, let's go. Keep going. Don't stop. Let's go. And we were trained by him to have that mentality, to not quit and to not feel that, I can't take this anymore. No, let's go. Let's go. And of course, I completed the monkey bar, the whole length of the monkey bar. Then he went back to Brazil a few days after that, and he passed away, and that just stuck with me. And it will for the rest of my life, and I'm going to do that to my children for sure.
So I'm going to take that away with quitting is not an option.
Quitting is not an option. And he never quit, and even fighting cancer, he never quit. In the hospital, when he had the last issue that made him have surgery, and that's when he passed, the doctors wanted him to lie down, and he's like, no, I want to stay, sitting as much as I can. And we have a story in our family. My great-grandfather, his grandfather, he was about to pass away. The family was there to see him, and he asked his sons to pick him up so that he could pass away standing.
It's great. Another brilliant mind that you were connected to, and I think part of the OG Money podcast is to get these OGs, right? Like these brilliant minds out into the universe so we can share this great advice for everybody else. What would you say Helio's like advice that you wake up every day and you hear it ringing in your brain that stuck with you from whether it was childhood he said something to you, whether it was later in life that he said to you, but something that you're just like...
What comes to my mind, it's a similar message, but in a different way. My dad, as I said, used Hélio Gracie a lot in our upbringing, and he would, for sure, now I know, looking back, he would talk to Hélio about us, about what was going on with us, so that when we had privates with him, he already was prepared to just touch on certain topics without ever saying that, your dad told me this or that. But one time, and I don't know exactly why this happened, I think I was 13 years old, Hélio Gracie told me this. He said, a black eye is a trophy for me. What you don't want is to not face a challenge, is to not fight. If you think you're right, fight. And if you lose and you get a black eye, that's a trophy, that's a gold medal. So never be afraid to fight. If you think you're right, fight. Don't worry about it. And if you lose, you lose. That's the analogy he created there. Black eye is a trophy.
Yeah, and I think I can relate with business. When you do the right thing in business, I've got a lot of scars. Being a financial advisor for 23 years, right? It's a different battle. But my true North Star has always been on the right path. And I've taken some hits, and we take a lot of risks in our practice. We go for it. We're not sitting there like, we're going to get you 3% a year with no volatility. We tell you how it is. Like, be prepared for volatility. If you bought Apple, Google, Facebook 10 years ago, you weathered some storms, but if you had that vision to see far ahead, you 10x, 15x your money. In life, I try to follow the right path. I think that it relates to what you're saying, not just in a physical fist fight.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But if you think it's the right thing to do, you have to do that. And if it means taking a 10% loss on an investment I bought today, the next day, you do it because you don't want that to be a 90% loss. So I would say I would relate with that with, it's okay to be wrong, not stay wrong. Meaning, it's okay to take a black eye if you are in the right.
Yeah, and learn from it.
Yeah.
But if you don't face challenges, I think it goes back to what we discussed and what you pointed out as being a big issue in today's society. If you just try to avoid, and if you don't face challenges, even shouldn't word the use avoid, but if you try to hide from problems, and if you try to mask adversity through artificial substances all the time, if you don't develop that thick skin that only adversity creates, you're really not going to learn, you're not going to develop, you're not going to fulfill, I think, your mission in life. I think we're here, especially to grow. I think that's really, at least that's how I see it.
Yeah, and I think ego plays such a big part in our society, even right here on the mats, and I'm guilty. I don't spar nearly enough, more because of the timing, family stuff, but early on, I can be honest and tell you I didn't want to spar because I didn't want to get beat. It hurt my ego. Today, I don't care. I'll tap 10 times. It doesn't matter to me at all, because I recognize, like, every time you tap, you learn, right?
Correct.
And there's guys that are doing well and they're doing better. So I've overcome that debilitating thing, but it's a real thing, right? Your ego.
100%. And you have to, and Jiu-Jitsu should help you exactly to learn from your mistakes. And if you're not learning from your mistakes, if you're not putting yourself in bad positions, because there's two options. One, you will be put in bad positions by force. Two, you choose to be in bad positions so that when you are put in bad positions by force, you'll actually be prepared. Again, it's very similar, and it's a great point that you just made. Jiu-Jitsu teaches you that if you avoid bad positions, or hide from bad positions, or fight at all costs not to be in a bad position, one day someone will put you in that position and you won't be prepared. Put yourself in bad positions, prepare for the worst, have a contingency plan, have an emergency plan, and you'll be ready. The mat teaches you that very quickly.
Yeah, you learn a lot on that mat. On a separate topic, MMA today, growing up in Jiu-Jitsu, watching fighting, I know you and I go off on some fights. What do you see that's lacking today in the UFC, not lacking, or is the UFC a business and you understand it and you enjoy it for what it is, but, you know, it's not what a real fight would consist of? So where are you today on the UFC?
Well, I respect the UFC as a business. It has grown tremendously. It provides many jobs all over the world, many fighters, everyone that works for the organization. However, it changed a lot. As someone who saw the beginning of this modern MMA era, I recognize the difference. I recognize really what was my teacher's objective and what today, I think it's more of a spectacle.
Yeah.
Right? What it became. Today, the objective is entertainment. You want to entertain the public through why not bloody fights. That's what the majority of the people that follow MMA want. And you want fighters that create a show. Initially, the objective of fighting other styles and fighting many times laymen's was to prove that Jiu-Jitsu, even if you were smaller, even if your opponent was a lot stronger than you, that through the technique, you could defend yourself and maybe even defeat your opponent. And you weren't trying to entertain. I think that alone was entertaining for the most part. And that's really the change that occurred over time. And I still appreciate, I still study the game. Many times I find situations that can be helpful for what we do, but I preferred the original format. And I recognize that format has an expiration time, because eventually everyone learns. The mission was accomplished years ago.
On this school, the vibe seems like it's back. It's pumping. That was an adverse situation. I mean, you guys, I think if you have to do a case study at Harvard Business School on a Jiu-Jitsu academy within a virus that gets spread human to human, the way you guys made that work is truly, I think, a phenomenal feat in and of itself. And like I said, I think that'll be studied in the halls of Harvard. Not many people right now in jiu-jitsu world are thriving, striving, and this family seems just as united as it ever was.
Yeah. It was definitely one of the most difficult times of our life, because we saw slowly every week everything that we built. It took us 20 years?
Yeah.
Pedro, if you consider the time that he was a student and he started his University of Miami Jiu-Jitsu club, almost 30 years. And every week we just saw how, because we closed the school and eventually we had to stay closed, we just saw many students, especially in the youth program, parents that are not as connected to us as our adult student body, just leaving and canceling their memberships. And it was very difficult for us. Fortunately, we have a very strong family, as you mentioned, who continue to support the school. We were able to, using the jiu-jitsu principle of yielding and adapting, from one day to the other, we closed the school, I think on March 15th, on a Saturday. On Monday, we were back up with online classes. It was the best at that time we could provide for our students, and we kept a community. We stayed in touch, and we also offered, it was in a way, emotional support for many of our students. And for almost 4 months, that's what we did. That really helped us. And then, of course, when we opened the school, we followed, I think, that no other jiu-jitsu school, like you said, and I'll say that, did a better job. Maybe some did the same, but nobody did a better job in following the health restrictions and the protocols. My brother Pedro was part of the committee that met regularly with the health department and the Secretary of Health here for our county, for Miami-Dade County. So we adapted, and I think also that gave students confidence. We treated this whole virus, the pandemic situation, just like a fight, a bigger opponent. We first had to analyze the situation, see what was happening, protect ourselves the best we could, stay away, keeping the distance, right? But eventually we have more tools, we start to know the opponent better, and eventually we have to fight. We have to fight. I think it goes back to what we discussed. We can't hide forever.
Yeah, and the leadership, the tentacles spread, because guys like me are watching the way you're adapting, and then my business goes up. The Zoom calls, being in the office, watching how you guys are doing things. It has more effect on your students than you would even realize, that leadership. And I think that's why people really come here, come back. You know, it's a very positive, uplifting, energetic space. So
yeah, we were criticized by other jiu-jitsu teachers saying, "Oh, I would never teach jiu-jitsu, online, or I would never teach jiu-jitsu then when we started with the dummies. This is not right, and this is, you guys are just accepting government restrictions, and but sometimes in life you can't fight the current. You have to flow."
There's politics involved in everything.
Correct.
Right? Yeah. You find that in a lot of things. You need to understand, who you're dealing with. As we wrap up, I do like to ask, do you have any questions for me?
Do you think jiu-jitsu was important in your life? I know that your family, your daughters have trained. Why is it important for you?
As a kid, I think...
Because you could fight already before you joined the school.
I would say, like, as a little kid, going back to who you were as a kid, had a little tough childhood, some adversity going on. My schools changed. I lost all my friends. I had to meet new friends. My parents didn't have the greatest relationship. They stayed married, but there was a lot of fighting going on. I also dealt with a lot of anger issues, getting into fights at school because I was small, defending myself. Ironically, it ends up I get thrown into the wrestling mats because they were like, you can fight people your own size, and I thought that was kind of cool. So at about 7th grade, I started training on the mats up through till 12th grade. And I always say, if I had you guys in my corner when I was in 7th grade, I probably would have not just been a state champion, but probably on a national rank level. I just never had the instructor. I was teaching myself. I had some gym teacher as my wrestling coach. Yeah. I just watched other kids and figured it out. Once that ended in college and left college, I got into a couple of different MMA gyms, just rough stuff. Not very. And I would see the Valente Brothers Jiu-Jitsu. It was Gracie then, right? It was on, and I was like, man, I got to stop in there. And a handful of friends I was talking to just so happened to be like, you have no idea who's there. Like, you realize that these guys actually grew up in the Gracie house. So that next day I came in to start training, and that smell, that feel for the mat, it's a safe place for me. It's where I can still get those demons out, that anxiety. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we can see that.
Yeah.
You really get the demons out.
Well, I'm a little bit aggressive. I'm working on that. You know what I mean? I've gotten a lot better. Like, over the years, I've calmed it down. But it's a great place, especially in our line of work where you're dealing with money, people's livelihoods, people's families. You have your own children, your own wife, and all that pressure builds up. And there's a place that you can go that has this positive energy. You're learning. Your mind is going. Not only are you learning self-defense, but you're learning a game of chess. One move here, one move there. And then that carries over to your business. It carries over to your house. It carries everywhere. It's a balancing act of getting in here enough to get good, making sure your wife doesn't want to divorce you because you're at jiu-jitsu all the time, and you're not missing out on any of your kids' sports activities because you want to be there for them. So there's a juggling act, but this has become a place that, has been a second home. The group of guys it's an amazing group of guys. Everybody here's, nobody's looking to be a tough guy in this place. Everyone's looking to be a buddy who can help you out. So it's a special place, and we're kind of lucky to have you guys here.
Great. That's great to hear. And thank you so much. This was a nice time machine experience. I really enjoyed.
Yeah, me too. And it was ironic because I had Pedro as my first guest.
Yeah.
I wanted to set it off. That's how much jiu-jitsu has changed my life and helped me. Then I got very active with the tactical stuff with Joaquin.
Which is great, yeah.
Yeah, so I was like, let's do a podcast tonight. And he's like, let's go. And then I saw you the other day. I was like, we got to do it. And then we wrapped this trilogy up. I'd love to get a podcast with your sister to see her perspective on all this stuff. So let's hold that out for when she comes to visit. I hope to one day be on the road, be a black belt here, and I'm not going to give up till I get there.
That's it. And we'll help you for sure. And you'll help us.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the OG Money Podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available.
Securities offered through Securities America Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered through Securities America Advisors Inc., an SEC-registered investment advisor. This site is published for residents of the United States and is for informational purposes only and does not constitute an offer to sell or a solicitation of an offer to buy any security or product that may be referenced herein. Persons mentioned on this website may only offer services and transact business and or respond to inquiries in states or jurisdictions in which they have been properly registered or are exempt from registration. Not all products and services referenced on this site are available in every state, jurisdiction, or from every person listed. Third-party comments may not be representative of all customer experiences.